everyone, and welcome to episode 526 of the MTGGoldfish podcast. I'm Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we have the full crew here this week, kicking things off with the owner of MTGGoldfish, Richard. How are you this fine Monday, Richard?
Good morning, Seth. I hate daylight savings. That was it in my TED
Tell
Talk.
me about it. I mean, actually,
Why?
no, I like daylight savings. I just wish we stayed with it all the time, because it's the changing back and forth. I like it staying light out later, but oh my god, the change is so brutal. Krim, your schedule is always brutal. Does daylight savings even impact the Krim schedule? How are you today?
I do despise daylight savings regardless. And also now that I'm semi-normal, I despise it even more. I go to bed now. I mean, I personally like longer nighttime than more daytime. So
yeah.
What?
That's
weird.
yeah.
It's you don't want the sun to like give you some healthy vitamins or whatever.
Krim is
No,
like a vampire,
dude.
I think. Yeah, a literal vampire.
It gets so hot, and then it's a reminder that when there's more daytime, it's time for spring, allergies, all of this.
I've never heard someone hate sunlight as much as Krim. But anyway, we're talking Magic today. We have some interesting topics. We got some Modern news. There's a big Modern tournament this weekend, U.S. Regional Championships. And the state of Modern might be a little rough, but we're going to get into that. Also, Standard. There was an interesting video from Brian Kibler about the state of Standard and what he thinks should change in Standard. There's some Secret Lair news. And then also, we got some spoilers. A new Final Fantasy card, a Dragonstorm, a Tarkir Dragonstorm card, and then a new Secret Lair drop that many people have been waiting for and or maybe dreading that just got spoiled today. So we're going to get into that too. But before we talk about all that, a reminder that today's show is brought to you by Card Conduit, and Card Conduit's the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. If you ever get tired of the hassles of buy listing, you can skip them with Card Conduit. You can use our curated service and send in as many cards as you want with a buy list value of $1 or more and pay just a 5% service fee. And if you want to do a bit of work, you can use their sorted service where you list and sort your cards in advance and pay just a 2% fee. And either way, you're going to get a detailed report with the results in a fast payment once your order is processed. And you can even get another 10% off by heading over to cardconduit.com/MTGGoldfish. Card Conduit, it's the easiest way to sell your Magic cards. So thank you to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And let's talk some Magic. And we're going to kick things off today with Modern. So Modern is a format that's known to be broken from time to time. That's kind of been the history of the format, especially in the last few years, the Modern Horizons era. So this weekend was U.S. Regional Championships, which if you're not familiar with the new system, the best comparison might be like an old G. I think it's a level above the old GPs. Like it's one step below the Pro Tour, but it's like the most competitive tournament below a Pro Tour. So it's a kind of a big deal. So this was a Modern Regional Championship. And Richard, what happened at this event? Just what deck performed well, perhaps, at regionals?
Okay, let me go through the top 8 for you. Breach, Energy. Breach, Titan, Breach. You want top 16? Breach. 11 of the top 16 were Breach. 6 of the top 8 were Breach. 50% of the top 32 was Breach. What is Breach, you might ask? That's Underworld Breach. It's Grinding Station. So Grinding Station is the artifact that lets you mill 3 cards, and then when an artifact enters play, you untap it. You can play the Mox Amber, and newly unbanned Mox Opal for free out of your graveyard with Underworld Breach, which lets you play cards out of your graveyard, untap the Grinding Station, mill yourself some more, keep doing this forever, and then finally finish off your opponent with a Grape Shot or some nonsense like that. But Breach is everywhere.
So our last big Modern tournament, people are already talking about this being a problem. And I was like, okay, I don't want to overreact to one tournament. Let's give it a little more time. And, we gave it a little more time. And if anything, Breach has dominated even more than it did a month ago. So we're not seeing the, meta adjusting to Breach, which is always what you hope when there's a busted deck, is that someone's going to figure out, if I play this sideboard card, or if I play this deck, I'm going to be able to beat the best deck in the format. Instead, Breach is just absolutely stomping the field. It turns out, if you give a Modern deck 8 Moxen, it's a pretty good deck. Who would have thought that being able to be the only deck in Modern to play a bunch of Moxen would make the best deck in the format? My question for you is, I think the community has already coalesced around the fact that there's got to be a banning. The next ban list update, March 31st, so the end of this month's about 3 weeks away. Had an interesting conversation with someone, a bunch of people yesterday on social media. What do you ban out of this deck? Do you ban Breach because Breach is an inherently broken card that's been banned in other Eternal formats? Do you ban Opal and just say, whoops, we made a mistake. We shouldn't have actually unbanned this. What do we do with this BNR? Like, what would you guys do with this BNR? What do you think, Krim?
If they ban Opal, which, I think is pretty obvious with that card, if it isn't already busted, it will continue to threaten to bust other things.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But if you ban that after that card hit like $200 a copy, ooh. I mean, I genuinely think what'll actually have to happen is probably Breach. Breach needs to go. And they can't. I mean, they should, but I think they won't ban something they just took off the ban list. So I think Breach is just going to take the L for it.
What do you think, Richard?
Both. So I don't know. You have two directions, right? This is new legacy. Therefore, you reprint Force of Will and Days and like basically free interaction into the format. So you can't really do this. And then you become a blue format because blue is the only color that gets free interaction like this. Or you ban Opal, but Breach is inherently just kind of broken and sitting around. You ban Breach, Opal's still broken. Like the fact that you get a Mox for a very low cost of playing artifacts is probably broken. So you hit both, but my guess is they're just gonna give you counter spells. My guess is they want like you can't keep skimming this off, right? Like there's always the next broken thing. And I feel they're just trying to increase the power level of Modern. So then just give us some free counter spells and call it a day. I think that's the easiest way. Otherwise, you got to ban this Modern Horizons 4, and then there'll be another combo deck that no one can deal with, or there'll be infinite value engine that no one can deal with. And then, I don't know. I feel we just want to play high-powered Magic now. So just give us the tools to do it and call it a day. But I don't know. I'm sure we'll find a new way to complain no matter what happens. So
you might be right that would be like a good direction to go. Although I think short term, like printing Force of Will and so forth into Modern is going to take a while. I think short term, you can't just let Breach go rampant for like 2 more years while you try to like print Force of Will somewhere. So I think short term, you gotta ban Breach because the format's just like pretty much unplayable at this, even by Modern standards.
Wait. How long has Breach been legal in Modern for?
Breach has been legal ever since 2020. It was printed in what?
So that's
Ikoria,
5
whatever.
years, 6 years almost, 5 years. I can't do math. And then it's been cool this whole time. And Opal comes along and then we're going, Breach is broken. Like, why not just hit the Opal? Right?
I will say, I think Breach has been broken in the past too. Like, it hasn't been as broken as it is right now, but it's another one of those cards. And you can argue that Mox Opal is also one of these cards, but it's one of those cards that either it isn't played or it's broken, right? There's not like I'm playing a fair Breach thing. Like, even if you convince yourself you're playing fair Breach, which no one in Modern is going to do, but I see Commander players do it sometimes. Like, I'm going to be the fair Breach deck, and then you still just combo off and win because it's such a ridiculously broken card.
I take offense to that, Seth.
Hey, you're not even a Commander player anymore, Richard. You have nothing to say now that you're retired.
Wow.
I'm kidding. But you know
I will point this out though, Seth. Simian Spirit Guide is on the ban list. Okay, just a free 1 mana at the cost of 1 card. Yet Mox Opal, repeated mana every turn, a combo piece. Like literally, it's needed to like make the engine of Grinding Station work. Right? Like it's literally not just mana, but it's like fueling the engine. Will go unbanned. The monkey is banned, Seth. The monkey is banned.
Just
the rituals are banned. Like all of these like extra mana things are banned.
Yeah.
But why does Opal get a pass?
Just so it's clear, I'm not defending Mox Opal. Mox Opal is a messed up card, and I think as soon as it was unbanned, Breach was the deck. I'm pretty sure if you go back to the podcast where we talked about the unbannings, Breach was actually a deck that I called out as like, there's a risk that Breach is broken with this, and that ended up happening. So it was like a fairly predictable thing. So I'm not like pro Mox Opal, but I'm also anti-Breach because I think Breach is also an inherently broken card. So I would be fine with banning both of them, like Richard said. I do think it sends a weird message if you ban Mox Opal again right away. How big of of a downside is it that you had all these people like run out and buy $150, $200 Mox Opals to play the best deck in Modern and then just ban it 3 months later or something? Like, is that worse than leaving it unbanned a little bit longer? Like that pain that it's going to cause by rebanning it?
Whoo! They're just tournament players. They don't matter, Seth.
Okay, you know how bad this is,
we were like, you can aggressively unban if you aggressively ban.
Yeah.
They're like, wait, you can't aggressively ban because it's going to be too much money. So we're just going to have to live with the consequences and hit these sidecards. I think if you want to take these risky unbans, you need to be able to ban them back,
Yeah,
right? Like,
I'd agree.
it sucks that these cards are expensive, but you're just going to ruin the whole format for like 2 years, while you dance around the issue. Like, this calls back to like,
Yes,
don't make
precisely,
those
they
risky
will.
unbans to begin with, right? It's like you drive fast and you crash. You're like, well, maybe you shouldn't have drove too fast, right? Like, don't be so risky about it, right? Like, I don't know. Like, I feel you got to fix the real problem, but
Yeah.
have we sold? Has Mox Opal been slated for a reprint yet? Has it been like revealed
No.
in Spider-Man or something yet? Like, I feel Wizards is like waiting for that, right? Like, it only makes logical sense. They unban this card, like, well, it's so expensive, we gotta print it somewhere. So they print it somewhere. Then they're like, wait a minute, this card is broken, but we printed it in this upcoming set. We can't just release this banned card, so we'll just breach. Sorry, you're broken.
All right. Is there any chance that Opal would be okay if it wasn't for the Grinding Station deck? Like, is there
No.
any chance that it's like ends up,
No.
okay, we ban Grinding Station and it kind of makes Affinity tier 2 and everyone's happy because they can play their Frogmites, but it's not that's not going to happen, right? It's just going to break something else. Is that what's going to happen most likely?
Yes. There's the. How is Mox Opal ever? If just the word Mox immediately makes me okay. I have to pay attention to whatever this card is doing. And yeah, I just don't think you can ever unban Mox Opal. I mean, they tried it. We now learned what we already knew.
Yeah. You know what's bad when I actually watching this tournament yesterday, it made me root for energy. I was sitting there like, yeah, get in there, Ragavan, pump that guy to souls. You can do it. Yeah. And I felt so dirty, but yeah, that's the world we live in where I'm apparently an energy rooter now. What do you think this means about the bannings? Because this was the other conversation that came up. So they've unbanned 3 cards: Faithless Looting, Splinter Twin, Mox Opal. My perspective is Splinter Twin, the least harmless unban we've seen in a long time. It's like tier 5 or something. Like, no one plays Splinter Twin. I think Faithless Looting has actually been a positive. We've seen like Hollow One kind of be a deck again and so forth, which wasn't really a thing before we unbanned Faithless Looting. Mox Opal, clearly a negative. What does this say about future unbannings? Was this a mistake to unban these cards? Should Wizards still be unbanning cards in Modern? Or is the lesson, you just shouldn't unban Mox Opal? What were you thinking? That was obviously not a good risk to take. What do you think about the future of unbans in Modern based on this Mox Opal debacle?
Honestly, if they do, okay, what Richard mentioned there earlier, Richard's got a good point, right? If you are willing to mess around, play with these unbannings and bannings, it comes, as long as you're willing to fix it, then and fix it quickly, then it's fine. So it's all about what they're about to do next. Will they actually be able to axe it? Because if they do that, then I'm actually feeling a lot better about them just randomly trying these experiments. Let's take this off the ban list. Let's do this. Yeah. That's great. But if they drag their feet and we have to see some cards stick around for another 30 years, that might be a problem.
I think Breach is taking the shade for looting. Looting is one of those other ticking time bomb cards, right? It's like, it's unplayable until it is, and then it's like Ancestral Recall plus like put your combo together kind of card, right? So I think they should just avoid these cards, right? If like you foresee in the next like 3 to 5 years having to ban this card, don't introduce it into the format under the guise that it's safe because it's literally stone unplayable until the second card comes along and then the deck is completely broken. Like, that's the point. That's what like play design is. You're supposed to be able to look at this and like understand that this is like a bad play pattern. You don't want this. So Twin is fine. Like, it's a meme. We all knew it was gonna be a meme, but I don't know about like it's like Golgari Grave Troll or whatever, right? They're like, oh, it's fine. until it's not. And then it's like insanely broken, right? And then they're like, oh, let's get Bridge out of here. That's always broken. And like, oh no, it's still things are broken. So I would rather just not have this. I think the number one problem is no one has faith in Modern. And this constant cycling of banning and unbannings, especially at the tournament level, like as casuals, we'd be like, oh, I don't want to play Modern. Okay, whatever, just go play Commander. As a tournament grinder, you're like, yo, looking for trades. I need 4 Mox Opals, right? You gotta buy the 4 Mox Opals. You gotta put the reps into this deck, knowing that it's gonna disappear in like a couple of weeks. Like, who wants to do that, right? Like, who wants to play a deck that's that's not going to happen. So I feel it's pretty bad for the tournament scene to have this flux, especially when the cards are so expensive. So I'd rather see stability. It's bad enough with Modern Horizons, like churning the format. Now you have like B&R coming in, like just messing with it as well. Like it's too much. What did we really gain? We got some boomers hyped about Splinter Twin for a while. Like, did we gain anything really for all this trouble?
For 2 weeks, people learned Splinter Twin is outdated.
I mean, we're having fun for a while.
I
right?
enjoyed
so
Modern.
Optimism. Yeah.
Yeah, there was
For
like
2 weeks.
Yeah.
But before that, I hadn't really enjoyed Modern for like a year and a half. We went from like scam into beans into the one, right? Like it's just been like busted thing into busted thing. So for me, getting like a month or two post ban where I really actually had a blast playing Modern, for me personally, that was a lot of upside. I'm also not a tournament player. I'm also not running out to buy Mox Opals to try to win an RCQ. So maybe I'm in a different position there. And if I was, maybe I'd think a lot differently about it. But I think there was an upside off of that. I think for me, I feel like Mox Opal was a bad risk to take. If you look, I also forgot Green Sun Zenith was unbanned, which hasn't been too much of a problem since I even forgot that they unbanned it, although it does see play in some decks. But I feel like most of the unbans have went fine. Sure, maybe Faithless Looting eventually becomes a problem. I just don't want them to take the message that, like, we should never unban anything. I think you should be smart about what you unban. And I don't think that Mox Opal was a good risk as far as what you unban in Modern. But I think there's other cards that you could bring off the ban list that would have more of a Splinter Twin or Faithless Looting level impact. So I just hope they don't avoid the ban list or unbanning things altogether because of this. Because I feel like there's a lot of stuff that could still come off that wouldn't be harmful to the format.
Wait, what's next on the unbanned list sets?
Pod. We gotta get Pod. Pod is next.
Oh, Pod is
Pod's probably too boomer.
Yeah, Pod is
probably too
good.
boomer.
Like this is gonna be the same thing with Splinter Twin, right? If they unban Pod, we're just gonna go, oh, that was so sick in 2009. That was
it's like Jace. Remember when people freaked out about Jace being unbanned, and then it was fine, and then Splinter Twin being unbanned? I'm pretty sure like we've just power crept so hard that any engine of a deck from like a decade ago is not actually that scary anymore. The stuff that scares me is the fast mana, like which is why I think Mox Opal. Whenever I did a breakdown, like a tier list of what I thought you could unban, the fast mana was the first stuff I would cross off that list and be like, no, like if you're gonna ban Simian Spirit Guide, you're definitely not unbanning Moxin. Like that's insane. And Wizards, I guess, viewed it a little differently than me because they went with the Mox Opal right off the bat. But I'd love to see Pod unban Jitte, like another iconic old card that there is no way that card's gonna have an impact on Modern. Like you can unban him as Jitte just fine, right?
No, you can't do that. You can never play a creature ever again between Bowmasters and Jitte. Like it's like punishing fire, right? It's like slow and grindy. And like probably won't do anything, but it just gatekeeps like so many decks out of the format. The funny thing about Opal is it went into a deck that really doesn't play any new cards. So when you unban something like Green Sun Zenith or Pod, you're like, well, you combine this old broken kind of engine card with the new bombs, right? Like whatever the bomb is from Modern Horizons 3 is, you can get a broken deck. But Opal just played with a bunch of other old cards and then like broke the format. So like this one is foreseeable, right? Like when they were testing the unbans, they should be like, wow, let's play this deck. And what does it look like, right? It's not like they had to wait 2 sets into the future and be like, I never saw this interaction happening. So that's a weird thing. But the biggest problem is engine pieces coupled with 2025 fire design or whatever. Like those are the problematic ones. The bombs from 5 years ago probably aren't bombs anymore, right? Like Jace the Mind Sculptor, etc. Right? So I don't know, but like does anyone test Modern? That is my question. Like I feel like they're just like, let's just unban this and call it a day when we're like, look, this grinding Breach Station deck exists. Seems like a logical include. you're already playing like Mox Amber, which like doesn't generate mana half the time, right? Like, how about we add another one that actually generates mana, right? So, I don't know, man.
I don't know how much testing goes into it. I think it's as simple as like we're printing a set with Affinity, which was Ether Drift, right? We got all this cool artifact stuff. Affinity's not very good in Mono. Let's unban it. And then we get another $150 card we can sell too. I'm not sure how much like testing goes into the decision, but from that perspective, it kind of makes sense, right? Like, oh, we're printing Affinity. What's good in Affinity? Mox. But oh, the negative consequences are just so high when it goes wrong with a card like that. So I don't know. Let us know in the comments. What do we do about Modern? I just have such little faith at this point that even if you fix Breach, something else is going to be broken, right? That's just like how Modern has been for a couple years now. So maybe it'll be like cool for a month or two after the bannings, but I guess I've given up hope on like a fair, the best deck in the format's 8% of the meta and, the old school like decade ago Modern. I think we're just past that point at this point. I'm curious though about Standard. Speaking of Magic formats, now we're going to get spoilers in a minute. So there's a video by Brian Kibler. One of my favorite parts of this video was apparently some people don't know who Brian Kibler is. They were on like Reddit and they're like, who's this random person? Why am I going to listen to this random person about magic? It's like, dude, do you not know who Kibler is? But Brian
Not
Kibler,
all boomers, Seth.
Apparently not, yeah. Or Hearthstone.
When was the
players.
last time Kibler played tournament Magic?
Yeah, that is true.
Actually, not that long ago. I feel like not that long ago, right?
I think he gets like the Hall of Fame invite, right? So he goes to Pro Tours once in a while. I feel like I saw him at a Pro Tour not that long ago. But here was his take on Standard. I want to see if you agree. His take on Standard was there's two problematic cards that are hurting the format. This should be banned from the format. Card number 1, Monstrous Rage. Card number 2, Up the Beanstalk. And paraphrasing his reasoning, and watch his video to see all of Kibler's words on it. But basically his argument was Monstrous Rage, it makes blocking not possible. And blocking is an important part of Standard Magic working. You need to be able to like block with your creatures. That's kind of the foundation of a game. So this card just removes blocking, and then it forces you to like overload on a whole bunch of like removal spells since you can't play defense with your creatures because it's silly because they'll just Monstrous Rage over them and kill you anyway. So essentially it cuts one important element of Magic out of the game altogether, which is blocking. And then Up the Beanstalk, his argument was essentially it's just better than everything else at being a card advantage engine. So everything just eventually ends up being a Beanstalk deck because it's better than all the other options. And I think we've seen this in the data where you don't see Caretaker's Talent as much anymore. You don't see Unholy Annex as much anymore because Beanstalk is just a better version of that card advantage engine. So his take was, we should ban those two cards, not so much specifically because of power, but because of how they reduce the decks and the play patterns of the meta and push it into a not great state. So curious what you guys think about that. Would Standard be better with Monstrous Rage, Up the Beanstalk banned? And is there anything else that you would add to the list if you're going to ban some stuff?
I'm very curious about this because, like we've talked about Monstrous Rage before and how much it's like a core centerpiece of the mice deck, right? But like, if you remove this, does red deck exist? Like, that's the main thing. Like, I genuinely think with how good removal is in this format, and you remove Monstrous Rage, I think red deck and, like, red aggression just does not exist. I know Embercleave kind of was like, this is similar to, like, an Embercleave, but I guess we're all realizing this now. My hot take that Monstrous Rage is just better than Embercleave may not be a hot take anymore, right? Because
that's probably true.
You worked harder for an Embercleave. And
you actually needed creatures, a bunch of creatures.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what I was wondering about because I guess I guess my personal opinion is I just don't think red can exist without it, right? And then we have Beans. I think Beans is absurd. I think Beans, when you're not playing a mill deck, I think Beans is very difficult, right? It's so cheap, it replaces itself. I understand that part. This is something that maybe we can touch upon in a little bit here, but I am very curious how they feel about This Town Ain't Big Enough, because if you remove both of these, right, then you have This Town Ain't Big Enough, and I think that card is also nuts. And it's funny because some of the best cards in the Standard right now, what do they all have in common? They're all uncommon. The uncommons,
that is true.
Like you have Sheltered by Ghosts as well. and you just have like some of the most busted uncommons.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is a product of like them having to make the cards draftable and like, making the draft environment better. I have no clue. But the main thing I have to say is like, I think are we not playtesting the uncommons? Because they're uncommons. Who cares, right? We're going to playtest the rares and mythics and things like that. But yeah, like right now, I that's a whole nother topic. But at the end of the day, I do think that if you remove Monstrous Rage, the removal is so good right now that I think red deck just gets obliterated if it loses this. Like, the one thing that I like about the standard is that you have the option of playing multiple flavors of a certain archetype of your choice. But I like, you could try goblins, you can try burn, and then you can have like traditional old just mono red low to the ground beaters. But I think that's gone once you remove rage.
Boy, that's a tough one. That's a really tough one. I feel like red would still be okay, right? Like, I feel like the mouse package is still good. I don't know. The thing I dislike about both of those cards is I feel like they cause a lot of non-games. I feel like
Sure.
against red, there's a lot of games where if they have the draw with like, I got my double strike mouse and I have a monstrous rage, it just really doesn't matter what you do. Like, yeah, if you have the right removal spell at the right time, that's fine. But in general, like, there's some games where it just doesn't matter. And I found that with Up the Beanstalk, too, where there's games where, like, I'm at 20 life and my opponent's at 20 life, but they have, like, 2 Beanstalks going and 7 cards, and I have, like, 1 card. And I'm like, actually, this game is over. Like, I know YouTube's going to yell at me about scooping early, but, like, really, this game is, there's no coming back from this. So I would like to see those, I would like to see them banned, especially, they don't have to ban them right now, but the fact that after they don't rotate this summer, and then the next rotation is January of 2027, which just sounds infinitely far in the future. It would be one of those cards that when they go to rotation this summer and do the update, I would like to see them. And also, as Krim said, either this town or maybe Hopeless Nightmare. I don't know which of those two I would want to see more.
It's this
but
town.
something, you think it's this town? Just get rid of this town.
Cut.
I would like to see those go, because the other thing that Kibler brought up was, from his perspective, he didn't think Ether Drift was a bad set. He thinks that sets like Ether Drift just get punished by these other cards that narrow the meta so much. So when people complain about Ether Drift being bad, it's not actually that the cards in Ether Drift are so bad, it's that these other cards, Monstrous Rage, Up the Beanstalk, are so good that the cards from Ether Drift can't actually compete with them. But what do you think, Richard?
All right, hold my beer, Seth. Let me disagree with Pro Tour Hall of Famer Brian Kibler. When has Standard been about blocking? Like, I feel Standard is not about blocking, so it's always like removal decks, right? And you guys are trying to remove each other because you can't block because if they remove your blocker, like, you're out of luck. But like, you have like attacking abilities, things that like, if they hit you, bad things happen. So hasn't Standard always been about like removal and tempoing people and stuff like that? Like, I feel if I wanted to talk about blocking in combat, it's limited, right? Like, limited, like, blocking is very, very important. So it's weird to me that he says that blocking is fundamental in Standard. So I don't know whether the card is broken or not. Like, how can it be that bad, guys? Like, yes, it's strong, but isn't it like the prowess and double striking things you shove this card onto rather than this, like, what is it, like 1 mana +3/+1 trample? Like, is that really the problem here? Or is it the double striking mouse? Or is it, the prowess stuff that you're stacking onto it? So I don't know, but it seems weird that this like basically pump spell that lets you trade up essentially, right? Like, cause it's like 1 mana. It's a pretty efficient pump spell. It's a lightning bolt, so to speak, right? Cause it's 3 mana on 1 card. But I don't know. I feel you could shove this card in like previous standards and like it'd be totally fine. It's really just we have a very aggressive red deck right now. So that this card with that like creates a problem. And then Beans, I think everyone knows is broken. I think the card really should say, if you spent 5 mana, if you spent 5 hard-earned mana, you draw a card, not pay 1 mana that technically this card costs 5, 6, 7, 8, or whatever, and then you get to draw a card, right? If it was just pay 5 whole mana, the most unplayable card you probably ever see, and then we wouldn't be talking about it, right? So, and I don't know why Wizards hasn't learned this lesson. Like, they keep doing this. I don't know if it's somehow like passing the thing. But anytime you try to balance a card by putting a mana cost restriction on it, you need to make sure people are actually paying that mana cost. Otherwise, it doesn't count, right? So, yeah.
That
Is standard
kinda
a problem though? Aren't we in a diverse metagame?
Yeah.
What are we complaining about? Really? We just don't like the play patterns. Like,
I,
isn't
I
it
think
kind
I
of
think
diverse?
I think this is just going back to how we felt about Embercleave, right? Like if you blocked an Embercleave, you were cooked, right? Like there's like it was
Yeah.
blocking has been gone for a while, so I guess I can kind of understand what you mean by that, but it's nice to know that you could block. Because like the formats where Embercleave wasn't around, it's like, oh, it made attacking a little bit harder. Granted that red also just was absolutely trash, I think, after Embercleave. So it's been a while since red has been good. But yeah, like I don't know. I mean, blocking is relevant. It matters in standard, and it's
I mean, it
been
matters, but I'm gonna call it the linchpin of like blocking
Maybe-
is super relevant in limited, right? And like vaguely relevant in modern. Like the older the format, the less relevant it becomes because your creatures may not size up. The best creatures are usually like too big, and then there are people that just don't care about creatures. But like you got to pack removal in standard, right? Like you can't let some of these threats go through. So I don't know, but I mean, he is Hall of Famer Brian Kibler. I will give him I will give him the pass. If he says blocking is fundamental to standard, that's probably why he wins Pro Tours and items, right?
yeah, maybe there's a
Richard,
reason
have
why
you thought about blocking? I'm like,
Have you
wait,
considered?
maybe I should have blocked this lethal attack, right? I don't know.
maybe that's why that's not Hall of Fame Richard instead of Hall of Fame.
Have
I
you thought about
got
blocking.
I mean, Brian is right though in that. Okay, it's more of not so much like does blocking matter or not. It's just that you just straight up remove a part of your game, right?
like
That's true.
yeah. And I think what he was saying is not so much like, yeah, you're gonna build a deck that's all about just blocking, but like a card like Wall of Omens or something. Like we're in the past where you can play like a two or like one of your Spirited Companion effects where you could like play those and you like draw a card and you chump for a turn to like get your late game set up. That whole play pattern is just kind of like off the table, right? Because of Monstrous Rage and so forth. It's like if you try to do that, you're just going to get trampled over and die, even through your Spirited Companion or through your Wall of Omens. So I think that's how I took it, is more not that you're going to build like a deck that's designed to be all about blocking, but you'd be able to like play cards like that more, which you just really can't play in this meta.
Isn't the inverse true though? If you can Spirited Companion to Wall of Omens and put up solid defense, doesn't that mean attacking is off the table now? Like if you can't even attack through a Spirited Companion, like what use is attacking? Right? So
Well,
attacking is off the table,
was-
which seems way worse than blocking is off the table, right?
But that was kind of the truth for red players, right? For a long time. You got to remember, after Embercleave, we did not have aggro, like real red aggro, until about now. So, I don't know. I've always been of the belief, even as much as I hate the archetype, just because they mow me down so quickly, I think a good format has a solid red aggro deck.
And I think that's true. I think a solid red aggro deck, I might argue that the play pattern on the current version's like pretty bad. Just like dying on turn 3 in standard is like not especially a great play pattern for standard, where you're just like, oh, I just like didn't actually play this game. So that part of it kind of sucks. But I do agree that having a good aggro deck is an important part of the paper rock scissors of standard. And I think some of this is just the lack of change from Ether Drift and arguably Foundations. Like going back to Dustmourne, we haven't really seen a big impact from new sets, and I'm going to be very curious to see how this goes with 6 sets in standard, because I feel like Wizards also need standard to change, right? They don't want the mice from Bloomborough to be the red aggro deck for the next 3 years until rotation, because they want to sell other sets. They want you to play other cards in your red aggro deck. So I'm going to be very curious to see how they handle like printing all of these sets and shaking up the meta, because I think it's going to be necessary for Wizards' perspective as well as players' perspective for sets to have more of an impact than Ether Drift did. And if we keep having a bunch of Ether Drifts that don't really have a big impact on the meta, then maybe you got to make some changes, because I do think Wizards and players want to see new sets have an impact, which just hasn't really happened the last couple sets.
Do you want my hot take, guys? I'm just full of hot takes today. So, the number one thing like casual people hate, it's like counterspell, right? Like you can never have like a strong like counterspell in standard. You know what the second thing is? Getting zerged down by red decks. Like every time
Yeah.
there's a strong red deck,
Yeah.
people complaining, right? Best of one, arena, whatever, right? You're like, oh my god, I can't deal with like you play like one inefficient card and like you're cooked, right? And people dislike that because equally you play no game, right? You're like, I missed my second land drop, I'm dead. Okay. 2 mana, play a thing, doesn't block. I take like 5,000 double strike damage, I'm dead. So I feel they're not allowed to make red aggro, right? Like if it's moderately good, people will have a bad time in the same sense that like a moderately good stacks deck is no good. If control is the best deck in the format, it's no good. These are all valid like rock, paper scissors type decks that, lead to a healthy metagame, but casuals don't like it, right? You don't want to be triple griefed, even if it's balanced or whatever. Like there are certain play patterns they don't like. And that's like turn 1, 2, 3, drop or whatever, double strike finisher, you're dead, I feel is one of those. And that's kind of the problem, right? Like, look how fast the ley line got banned in best of one for casuals, right? But
out of here super
I
quick.
feel whenever red is good, there's a problem. So red mages are always suffering. They're never good enough. They got to be the rogue deck that punches through because it's just a inherently unfun play pattern, right?
I wish Burn was good. I like Burn. I miss old school Burn. Throw a lightning bolt at someone's face. Come on, kids. That's how it's supposed to be
not
played.
possible in the current year. Not,
right? Boros charm. Bolt wave.
You can win with a deck like 7 lightning bolts to the face. Do you think you can win before you die?
I think
not against mice. No. Well, maybe because you can bolt the mice. But...
You can bolt the mice.
I don't know. I guess that's fair. It's just like I feel like I at the same time, right? We're looking at like this is going to be a wild comparison, right? But 3 fairy removed interaction, right? So this is less about the archetypes, I think. This is more of just straight up the health of gameplay, right? And I agree that red should be good. So again, like this is not like, me trying to take toys away from red aggro. This is more of just a card that has obliterated a key element of Magic. Now, of course, some people will be like, yeah, well, removal removes the element of me having a creature. And it's like, well,
that's true, right?
Sure. This is where the tuning of the knobs, just like this might be a little overtuned because how many years have we got? This is wild. This is power creep. By the way, again, not a bad thing. I think power creep is fine across card games. It's needed, but this is power creep at its finest where it's in the wrong direction, where like how hard do we have to turn the knob to the right until giant growths are busted? and like we're now learning that
this is giant growth. This is like Rancor. You remember Rancor, the green enchantment that gives you +2/+0 trample, and you get it back from the graveyard when the thing dies. Like this is some combination of giant growth and Rancor.
The Titanic strength beefed up.
It's enough,
right?
Yeah.
I'm thinking like when is the last time we had a combat trick matter? Like pump spell, instant spell, like aggressive. Dive down is kind of like a defensive thing. Like that's not so much a proactive. That's reactive, right? So I find it funny that what is that? The last time we had even a slightly playable one was Theros, right?
Yeah, no, that is true. It's been a long time. Like typically pump spells aren't that good in constructed
what
Magic.
Was the Teamer Battle Rage deck or whatever? We had that in Standard, right?
Okay,
like,
double strike.
That was literally all in.
Yeah. There's been I guess.
Okay, like it pops up once in a while, and then when they're good, they're really good because they actually work. And then when they don't work, you just get blown out, and never heard about ever again.
Yeah, I guess that's fair.
How much of this, and we got to move on to some spoilers, but I'm curious, how much of the angst about this do you think is actually just the rotation changes? Because as I was thinking about Kibler's arguments, I was like, I don't even think we'd be having this conversation if rotation was just happening as it used to, and because all these cards would be rotating, right? Like,
no, Rage is still here.
No, wasn't it from Wilds of Eldraine? Which would be 2 years. It would be rotating.
Oh, like, you're right.
Under
it's
the
not
traditional schedule. Yeah. So like under the
Bloomborough.
Yeah, under the traditional schedule, Up the Beanstalk and that would be rotating this year. But instead they got a whole nother like year and a half to go. So I wonder if that's part of it too, is people trying to adjust to this new schedule where cards are around longer, because it does feel like some of those cards that are at the top of the meta are around for a long time these days.
It sounds like the people that need to adjust to it are also still people at Wizards, right? Because I don't think was Eldraine designed with 3-year standard in mind.
I believe I'm pretty sure that was one of the sets that was not. That they said, I think it was up until like Murders at Karlov Manor was the first set that was kind of designed for it, and then like after Outlaws of Thunder Junction in Bloomborough was really fully designed for it.
If there are cards that are like pre 3-year standard with that in mind, like that exist and are playable in the standard, that is something they need to take into account and potentially lob off just while we can, right? Unless maybe there's something on the horizons that we don't know about that's like, in Tarkir where just everything that we've complained about is unplayable.
Siege Rhino. We need a Siege Rhino to make red bad.
Siege Rhino. Mini Rhino is what's going to put us back on the map.
We're good.
3-4.
Good, yeah.
That
we just got to make it a month
also run over.
It has trample. We can't block. What are you talking about? We got to bring back block.
Ban that Rhino. Let's move on. Richard, you brought this up. There's some interesting Secret Lair news with a new Marvel drop that's coming. What's going on with that drop that makes it a little different than most Secret Lair drops, Richard?
All right, there is a Marvel Secret Lair coming to WPN stores, which is basically your LGSs, that will contain mechanically unique cards. So Secret Lairs coming to your LGS with mechanically unique cards, and then something to do with Marvel. We don't know what it is, what IP it is, or whatever. But LGS is getting Secret Lairs.
What's Marvel, Richard?
I don't know what
is
Marvel
that an X-Men thing?
I'll have to check it out sometime.
So Wizards, they announced back in January that they were going to do some tests with Secret Lairs going to WPN local game stores. This must be the actual first one that we've seen in practice. I feel like this is probably a good thing, right? So just so it's clear on this, you can still get Secret Lairs the way you normally do by waiting in line for hours on the website and hoping that you get it before everyone else. But you also have the option to pick them up from your local game store if it's a WPN store, which I think is all upside. Doesn't everyone win in this scenario? Like, you can do it the old way if you want to. It also helps your local game store because they're going to make a little money off selling these. In theory, it helps Wizards sell even more Secret Lair drops, and then players have another option where if you don't want to wait in line on to try to get it through the website, you can just talk to your LGS. Like, it seems like good news all around. Outside of I don't really like mechanically unique Secret Lair cards anyway, but other than that, it seems good, right?
I want to see this. I want to see what this means, right? Like, I this is one of those ones where it could be great. It could help solve that issue, like you had mentioned, and just also all around support LGSs. That much I do like, but I guess there's some ways where there's some where LGSs may just load up on these and then it doesn't sell because which drops does an LGS pick up, right?
That's true.
And then when you think about that, then it's okay, well, now LGSs kind of get burnt on this if they load up on, I don't know, the Monty Python Secret Lair. Not that they would get burnt on this, but they load up on it. It sits around. It rots on the shelf. Then the next wave comes out and they just don't order as much. So I'm curious how this plays.
I think it could go the other way too. So there could be an issue that they get way too much and get stuck with it. The other thing we've seen from the Secret Lair fetch lands and stuff is sometimes your WPN store getting it means they get 2 copies for their whole game store. So we'll have to see how many they can even give to local game stores, because maybe this is super scarce and it's going to sell for way more above MSRP or something. So what do you think, Richard?
My guess is it won't work out. My guess is they're not going to get enough, right? If it's so plentiful that you can just walk into your LGS, right? That means it's plentiful online as well, right? If it's sold out online, it's probably sold out at your store, right? And then you have to do some weird store lottery process to get it, right? I don't see a world where this actually helps, but I don't know. Right? We'll see how it plays out in practice. But my guess is they'll have very few, and it'll be very difficult to get, and you'll just default to going online anyway. Because if you try to buy anything that's in high demand from your LGS, it's hard, right? Is whatever that process any better than lining up on the website? I don't know. So we'll see how it plays out. I don't know if did they say the foils are available online, the non-foils are available offline? I don't know if there's some distinction here that might make it relevant. So yeah.
I believe that the ones that you get from your WPN store are non-foil, but the website will still sell both. That's not like an exclusive WPN thing, so you'll still be able to buy non-foils from the website as well. That's my understanding, at least. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. Speaking of Secret Lairs, we got some news today, boys. We got some news. People have been counting down the days. Way back at last MagicCon Vegas, I think. They did a bunch of announcements about stuff that was going to be coming up in the future of Magic. And one of those things was SpongeBob Universes Beyond coming to Magic. Well, today, we got to look at the SpongeBob cards. It is a series of Secret Lair drops going on sale on March 24th through the website. And there's like 20 cards or something, a lot of key characters. Richard, why don't you kind of summarize what's coming in these drops, and then we can talk about these cards and if we'd actually play them.
You want me, who knows nothing about SpongeBob? Okay, we got.
Hey, I'm right there with you.
They're all reskins. They're all reskins. So they're existing cards with like SpongeBob names. For example, Plankton, Tiny Tyrant is Skrell's Defector Mite. We have Charix, which is Mr. Krabs. Grazilax, Ithlid Scholar. That's the Baldur's Gate thing. That's Squidward.
Yep.
Gary's Toxroll. Sandy Cheeks is Tosky. Patrick is Barktooth? Who's Barktooth?
I think that's an old Vanilla Legends legend. Just one of those people that just like, it's a legend for some reason.
7
yeah.
mana, 6/5 in Rakdos. Okay.
Yep.
And then SpongeBob is Joda. And then we have just magic cards with art, with SpongeBob art. So we have Counterspell, we have Daze, Inedible Betrayal, Force of Despair, Night's Whisper, 5 basics, 1 of each type, and then a food token.
Wait,
that's all
you're doing the reskins a disservice on the spells here. Okay, those are all the iconic memes, Richard.
Oh, they
Come
are?
on. Yeah, these are like iconic memes.
I recognize
online.
Inedible Betrayal. Inedible Betrayal.
Like
Oh,
the
the
Daze
counterspell.
Oh, I see it. I
The
see it.
counterspell's
Yeah.
pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Squidward looking out the window on Force
Yeah.
of Despair. Yeah.
The Squidward
That's-
waking up at night with his like the bloodshot eyes. That's Night's
Night's
Whisper, right? Like you've got Mr. Krabs, like the spinning motion where Mr. Krabs is like frantically looking around his days. Like I'm sorry. Not,
They're pretty good
Is this
choices.
the greatest
I
Secret
will
Lair
say.
ever? You guys seem very amused by this. Is this
so,
the
okay.
greatest Secret Lair ever?
I actually think the memes are pretty funny. It's better than I expected. I was thinking that SpongeBob might be super cringy, and I think it is a little cringy, but I think going with the memes makes it feel way better to me. Personally, I would not play any of the actual creatures, I don't think. I would not like have SpongeBob lead my Joda the Unifier deck or Patrick Star lead my Barktooth Warbeard deck.
I don't know.
The ones
anyone
that are
has a
memes,
Barktooth
though,
deck.
Yeah, I guess that's also true. Patrick kind of got screwed on this. But the like counterspell is really good. The Daze is really good. The food token with the burger is really good. Those cards, I think I would actually somewhat unironically play in a deck because I actually like them. What about you? Where are you at, Krim? Are you going to play all of them?
All right,
Like,
all
if
right.
you have a Joda deck, are you playing SpongeBob as your Joda? Is this Miku 2.0 for you?
I don't have a Joda deck, but now I do. So
Oh, no.
call me whatever you want. All right, call me the Slop Goblin. I'm here for this. I am it's not my fault that all the things I loved became popular. This is so funny, dude. Like, are you kidding me? Think about the flavor here. They have Force of Despair as Squidward watches as Patrick and SpongeBob are playing outside. They have Bikini Bottom, Kelp Forest, right? They have every Kelp Forest has a little Gary in there. It's so cute. And then Plankton's just flavor text is I went to college, and I remember that episode as bright as ever, right? And so Patrick, the reason why he is nothing but a vanilla 6/5 is, and it's the iconic episode where he just, let's just go with, again, not everything is working for Patrick, right? Let's just go with that. I do really like this drop. I think that the artwork is hilariously cute in SpongeBob. I was wondering if this is going to be like the, have you ever heard of the, I think Carmack or something like that. That was the name of this YouTube channel. They had made a SpongeBob anime. So, and it's super serious. It's super serious and it's hilariously well done. And it's just animated by I think a small group of 2 dudes or something like that. But I thought this was going to be super serious, dark and gritty art. Oh, this is SpongeBob on, I don't know, Ravnica or something like that. But no, they just kept it very lighthearted. I thought I think it looks hilarious. My only gripe so far with every one of these cards, or not with every one of them, just really one of them, is Plankton. I like Plankton. I think Plankton is hilarious. The active, turning Skrelv into Plankton, that works for the most part, except for Plankton's also kind of a genius. Plankton builds a lot of robots, inventions, and things like that. So I think the only reason why Plankton is Skrelv is because Skrelv is a little guy. Plankton is a little guy. That's it. They just made it because he's a little guy. But I think Plankton should be making artifacts or something like that, personally. I don't care if he's in white, because technically I feel like no character in SpongeBob is... Okay, that's a lie. But these characters aren't truly evil. Plankton is evil in the same sense that he's more of comically bad at he's bad at being evil. So that means he's not evil. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think these are all great. The art is fun. The Krabby Patty art is perfect. The only critique I have with the Krabby Patty art I have personally is that in the show, they show you this really bad looking real burger. And it looks like it's plastic. This burger is animated. Now, I do love this burger as well. And this is nitpicking. I also love Tyler Walpole. If you're out there and you're hearing this, I love your art, man. Great job. Keep killing it, dude. This is just a nitpick, and I'm just dude, okay, would it be better as this animated burger, which is also in the show, or the real looking burger, which is funny, because the real looking burger looks hella unappetizing. So
Krim is like a SpongeBob historian.
Yeah,
My God, do you know your SpongeBob? I am very blown away. I would watch it. If you want to do a YouTube video about SpongeBob, Krim, let me know. I would watch it.
I grew up with it, right? This is peak. What did the 90s kids have? You think about the cartoons through the generations. This is our show. This is our thing here.
Krim is actually one of the smartest guys in the entire world, and you just would never know because he applies all of this knowledge to useless things.
To SpongeBob. Yeah.
He's I only casually follow this. We spit back literally every episode name, the entire plot line, and I'm like, oh, okay, Mr. Photographic Memory over there.
But only on pointless things.
Only on pointless things. If we just applied this to world hunger, we would be fixed. But instead, we're critiquing animated burgers on a food token.
Would you play any of these cards, Richard? Would any of them?
No, I feel like Seth does every this is an X-Man. What is this?
Yeah.
I mean, the Toski's playable, Night's Whisper's playable. I will say,
no.
I don't know if
would you play that version though? Are you gonna replace your Toski with okay? You would.
No, not Toski, but I could play Night's Whisper. Counterspell Days, I would never play those cards. So I don't know. I will say it doesn't feel as out of place as I thought it would when they initially announced SpongeBob. And I don't know if that's because we've just been looking at Spider-Man and Final Fantasy spoilers and we're just whatever now, right? But they look well done. It's not oh, what is this, right? It's it's a sellout for money or whatever, right? So the lands look really nice too. I'd play the lands.
I would play the lands too. The lands do look actually just legitimately good. Even if you don't care about SpongeBob, they just look cool. So yeah, well, that's coming up soon on the Secret Lair website, March 24th. Speaking of spoilers, one quick one for Richard, and then we got to get to Fishmail. We got one Final Fantasy Commander spoiler, and I'm kind of curious if this is an iconic character, because I don't really know Final Fantasy. It's a Celes rune Knight. Am I saying that name correctly? It's a 4-mana 4/4.
We didn't have voice acting back then, Seth.
Wizard. Oh, you don't, did I? Human Wizard Knight. When Celes enters, discard any number of your cards and draw that many +1. So a Valakut Awakening. And then when one or more creatures enter, Let me read that again. Whenever one or more creatures you control enter, if one or more of them entered from the graveyard or was cast from the graveyard, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. So, Richard, what is this character from Final Fantasy? Is this in one of the games that you played?
It's
This
not
is from
Celes.
6, right? It's Celes? It's Celeste?
It's
I don't know.
Celeste?
This
Oh,
was before
Celeste.
the age of voice acting. We don't know what their names actually are. Doesn't she reflect things or something? Like, shouldn't she like counterspell or something? I don't remember. It's been quite a while. But the borderless version looks crazy. It's another Mardu type commander. I don't know about these colors. These colors always throw me off, but I don't know.
I feel like that
this is not one of the exciting characters for me. This is this is like
so
okay. This is okay. Not as iconic, but she's still pretty iconic. But you gotta go old school with this.
I feel like the card's
definitely-
like pretty good.
This is before my time in Final Fantasy. I started in 7, so I don't.
That was
I know,
back when
I've
you were
never
watching
played
SpongeBob.
6. Yeah. I was watching SpongeBob and reading comics at that age. No, like I think this card looks interesting. I don't know. I mean, it's just like any other Mardu card, I feel like here. Nothing like pops off the page for me here. But again, this is because this Final Fantasy I may not know, so I don't know the flavor of this one. You get into 7, the game right after 6, which by the way, I understand, Richard. Everyone says 6 is the Final Fantasy, that like they swear by it. You gotta play it, and I agree. I know there's a lot of weight in 6, so I need to go back and play 6. I think
I don't
it's
know if
time
you
for
can
me
play
to do
6 anymore. It may be too dated, but like 6 was like the pinnacle. That and like Chrono Trigger are the pinnacle of like 2D RPGs. Maybe like Secret of Mana too. I don't know, right? But like, and then 7 was the first 3D one, so it's always like goated. But I'm pretty sure this ability has nothing to do with her ability. I remember she like channeled stuff or something. But I don't know. It's just generic Mardu. Kind of like I don't know. It's like generic Mardu when I read these abilities. Also, you get heavily punished by Crim and like card draw punishers. Like these things that like
Bowmasters get you.
these things that like cycle, right? But like they don't like you like cycle multiple cards. If someone puts a Bowmasters or something on the battlefield, like your deck simply does not work anymore. So I'm a little worried about that. And we've had so many Mardu commanders recently, so I don't know, but I'm sure there's just so many commanders. You're gonna get so many Mardu ones anyway, right? But I'm sure it's cool. I'm gonna Google what her ability is. I'm curious now.
I feel like as a Magic card, it's like it's kind of generic, but like in some sort of graveyard reanimator deck, it seems powerful. Like having a commander that comes down and just Valakut's Awakenings away your hand into the graveyard, and you get to draw an extra card. Like this seems pretty good, and then you reanimate something and you start putting counters on stuff. So it doesn't really push you in like too specific of a direction other than graveyard shenanigans. But I feel like it's pretty powerful leading some sort of graveyard deck, just because I think that Enter's trigger is actually like pretty good. That's only 1 more mana than Valakut Awakening, and you get it in your command zone. So seems like a powerful reanimation commander. But let's do a couple Fishmail. I found a couple of good ones. We got one super quick one, but I wanted to give it a shout out because it is deserved. This one comes from Banana Hippie Hat over on Blue Sky. Says, who does your art on your YouTube thumbnails? I love it, and I want them to know. Richard, who's our thumbnail artist?
It's Adriano. So this one came on Blue Sky. Oh, what's Adriano's Blue Sky?
I think it's still Am
not...
Katani, I think.
Is it the same still?
Yeah.
I think
Katani.
so. It's still Am Katani.
So you can check out his art. He does all of our thumbnails. Well, not
all
all
of our
but
thumbnails.
the one with the custom art, you can see. His style is very distinctive. So when you think Goldfish style, it's Adriano style.
And I know he takes commissions and stuff, so if you ever want your own Adriano piece, he'll draw you a token or a playmat or something if you reach out to him. So yeah, he's definitely amazing. Fishmail number 2, this one also from Blue Sky. The Lasagna Man, .bluesky.social, at the Lasagna Man, says, I play at an MTG club at my university where a large majority of us play Commander with an occasional cube and draft once a month. What do you think would be the best way to get Commander players into other formats, and what's the best format to start off with? Any advice on getting Commander players who draft occasionally into 60 card Magic? I mean, I think you got to start in Standard, right? Like
Always Standard, right?
It seems very, very hard to start in like Modern or even Pioneer. The decks are more expensive. The meta's way harder to learn, and there's a lot of crazy stuff from old decks and synergies going on. So I feel like you got to start in Standard. What's your pitch though? Like, how do you sell a Commander player on Standard? I wish I had a better answer to that. Yeah,
I think kitchen table is the answer. Like, if you don't like play seriously, you just like you build 60 card decks where it's 4 of each deck, and that's it, right? And then you all just raid your LGS bulk bin and build decks. I feel that's the way to play it rather than play Standard, and then you're like, well, what's the meta? And then I gotta go drop like $200, $300, and like all that. Like, if it's just like a random club where no one plays and you're asking this question, I think kitchen table is the way to go. Just buy like a giant box of bulk and then build 60 card. It's like Cube, but like bigger card pool or something, right? Like I don't know. Like, I feel that's how I started playing 60 card formats, and we just gotta bring that back, right? Like, don't go to websites and look up stuff. Once you go there, you can't go back, right? Once you play meta, you can't go back because you're like, well, I know what the best card in the format is, and I gotta play this card, right? So
I feel quite
like,
the inverse. Once
what?
you know
Play
what the
meta?
best card, once you know what the meta is, then you are allotted the like leeway to just play the garbage cards and know how to make them work, right? Like, personally,
once
that's
you
how
fully understand the meta, then you can. You have good understanding of Magic theory, then you can play things that spike that meta with garbage cards, right?
Yeah.
What would you say, Grim? Any advice on getting Commander players to try other formats?
I mean, I would only, because like the problem is the philosophy of why, like, it's why you got into Commander.
Yep.
What did you get into Commander for? If you got into Commander because you like, just hanging out with the buds and playing, like, not really caring about what's going on, then I would argue that any 60 card format is not that, right? But
you might as
if
well stick with Commander, really. Yeah. That's the goal, probably.
But I think you can still get that in Cube. I think you can get that in Cube, but that depends on having friends having a Cube, right? Which is kind of like Commander anyways, because there's randomly... I personally preferred non-powered cube. I don't like powered cubes, but like if there is a powered cube, you get to do the busted thing. It's fun. It's a novelty, and you still get to hang out with friends and just not really care about what's going on and just do some busted things here and there. So I think cube or funny enough, I think maybe even limited, but that's hard. That's harder, actually. That might be harder. Hold on.
Expensive.
Yeah, and it's expensive.
I don't understand why we always like say beginners should play with sealed or something. Like, you sit there and like spend the entire session reading cards, right? And then you don't know how to actually put a deck together, and it's like just a miserable time. But it's expensive, and they already said they cube and draft once a month, so they're familiar with those formats. They just want to get into constructed. What about like Pauper or something? Is that like
Pauper? Pauper actually, if you're price conscious, Pauper's an option where you could actually put together, for the price of one of your draft nights, you could probably have everyone put together a Pauper deck and do a little Pauper night. So if accessibility is a concern, I actually kind of like that. Like, the challenge even with Standard, I guess if you play casually, that I like what you said, Richard, because that's how I started playing too, is playing these big like 8-player. It was kind of like Commander before Commander was like a popular thing, but just like casual decks with a bunch of people playing each other, and it was super fun. So I think that's a good option. But Pauper, if you want to build like competitive decks and try to push towards being spiky, the decks are cheap enough that you could easily have everyone put together a deck. I think what Grim said though, like, kind of feel out the vibe, because if people just want a fun night of getting together, you might already be doing it the best way possible by like playing Commander and cubing once in a while and doing a draft once in a while, like, because other formats just tend to be more spiky and the attitude is more spiky. So you might already be doing it the best way possible for your group, but
play Modern. We need more people complaining about Mox Opal.
Buy some Mox Opals, $800. And then
you're like, man, I love Magic the Gathering. Then I played Modern, and now I hate it.
Anyway, those are Fishmail. Richard, how do people send in Fishmail for future podcasts?
All right, hit us up with the hashtag MTGFishmail. at MTGGoldfish on Twitter and Blue Sky, and we'll get to your questions on air.
And I believe that brings us to the end of episode 526 of the MTG Goldfish podcast. So Richard Grimm, thanks for hanging out. Thanks everyone for listening. Thanks to Card Conduit for supporting the show. And we'll be back next week to talk about whatever goes on in the world of Magic. So until then, have an amazing week, everyone. And this is a crew signing out.